Hello everyone, and welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Television, where I give my pros and cons with everything related to the small screen. I was going to do a video on how I would fix Peppa Pig, but then I realized, oh yeah, Bluey exists. So in the end, there's no point in making Bluey look like a knockoff now. But if you really want to know what I would give Peppa Pig as a show currently, I'd give it a 3.5 out of 10 stars. It's bad, but I don't think it's as bad as everyone's been saying it is, because the first two seasons are actually pretty good. So what am I going to review now? Well, this show is if you take The Nightmare Before Christmas and mix it with movies such as Toy Story and Monsters, Inc. And yes, the show I am talking about is Bump in the Night. So why don't we go over the many things this show does right, shall we? Now, if you're familiar with The Good, the Bad, and the Television, you would know that I go over the history of certain shows. However, in this case, there was not a lot of history I could find on the show. A bit like Mike, Lou, and Nog. But thankfully, there was more information I could find on the show's production than Mike, Lou, and Nog. So here's what I have discovered. In 1993, a series of ad bumpers were created for ABC's Saturday morning lineup by David Blyman and Ken Pontac, the latter of which would go on to become one of the writers for Lazy Town, which is one of the greatest shows ever and my second favorite preschool show of all time. So now saying all of that, this really does give a good idea of what kind of score I would give this show. But let's get back on topic, shall we? In 1994, ABC was so impressed with the ad bumpers that they commissioned a full series. And so, partnering with Danger Productions and Greengrass Productions, the two created Bump in the Night, which aired on ABC from 1994, September 10th to be exact, all the way up to December 2nd, 1995, with a Christmas special that aired a week later, spanning across 2 seasons and 26 episodes. However, what's really unique is that there were not 52 11-minute segments, but rather 45, meaning that they probably didn't have enough time to finish an 11-minute segment for some of the episodes in the second season. Then, in 1996, the show's rights were purchased by Deke Entertainment, who at the time was owned by Disney. And despite never producing the show, they managed to get the rights. And then Deke went through several renames and changes and was bought by different companies until it now became what we now know as WildBrain, which owns many different properties such as My Little Pony, well, actually that's Hasbro, but whatever, and Caillou. You know what, the fact that they have Bump in the Night kind of makes up for it, so I'll give them a pass there. And that's all I could find on the show. Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of information that was able to be found, but I did manage to find some. So now let's move on to the actual show itself, starting with the story and the writing. So this show takes place in a 10-year-old boy's house, and we follow the adventures of a green monster who lives under the bed named Mr. Bumpy, and his best friend, a blue monster who lives in the toilet cistern named Squishington. Also joining them is a rag doll named Molly Coddle. Yeah, for the rest of this review, I'm going to call her Molly Cuddles because you know it's a big problem when Cuddle just doesn't sound right to say, and it gives you the impression that she's a spider, and Cuddles just sounds more right to say because it gives you the impression that she's a soft doll. Now, you'd think that this show would be boring given that very dull concept, but actually no. This show was able to do what Big and Small did and present us some really interesting character and moral dynamics. What do I mean by that? Well, the characters are already likable as is, and the morals are pretty good. But thanks to their dynamics, they can be really well developed, and the morals can be much better taught. Not hurting is that these morals can be taught in really entertaining ways. I'm particularly thinking of the episode Baby Jail, which is quite possibly the funniest episode of the show. In this episode, Mr. Bumpy is asked to take care of babies, but he doesn't want to because he sees them as whiny, spoiled brats. But then that really bites him in the back when he turns into a baby himself and sees them for who they truly are. Gangsters, or thugs. Yeah, that might sound a little bit bad to say, but I'm serious. That's how this episode portrays them. Especially with their leader, Big Mike. who I have to admit is one of the funniest characters in the entire show. He takes his villainous leader role so seriously to the point where you can't help but laugh with him. But at the same time, he's threatening enough to where you can take him seriously and feel bad for Mr. Bumpy. That is honestly really cool, and I don't think any other show has done that, if I'm not mistaken. One last thing to point out is that this show has some songs that could take on different genres, much like the Backyardigans. And don't you worry, an episode on that will be coming next season. So what do these songs have? Well, they actually teach the morals that were learned in the episodes. Okay, sure, some of these morals can be plain obvious, but some of them you have to look for in the episodes to really get it. And some of these songs don't even teach morals, and they're just more explaining the characters. Unfortunately, I cannot find these songs anywhere online. If you know where I can find them, leave them in the comments below and I may check them out. But overall, Bump in the Night proves that simple stories can be hard to write for, but that does make a longer show. But it's a real shame this show only lasted 26 episodes and a Christmas special, because I could see this going on for a bit longer and still keeping the same quality. So what about the characters? Well, as I said, the dynamics make them a lot better. So let's get into some of them. First, we have Mr. Bumpy. I like this guy. Yeah, he has a gross diet of dirty socks and dust bunnies, and he can be a bit mean to his friends, but then at the same time, he actually has a heart and soul. Particularly in the episode A Sneeze in Time, where he goes back in time to try and avoid making Squishington sad. That, honestly, is really cool, and it paints a jerk with a heart of gold in a more sympathetic light. These are the kinds of characters that Laura Jill Miller does brilliantly, but Jim Cummings does them even better in my opinion, and that's perfectly displayed with Mr. Bumpy. Now we get to Squishington, who's also pretty good. My one main issue, however, is that his confidence can be inconsistent. At first, he can be such a coward that you can't laugh anymore and instead cringe, but then on the other hand, he can be a bit overconfident, like Rex from season 20 of Thomas and Friends. Now that's not a bad thing. In fact, it does teach a good moral of overconfidence gets you nowhere. But yeah, consistency with his courage is not his strong suit. Rounding out our main trio is Molly Coddle, who is the most developed character in the entire show. Not only do we see her grow as a character throughout each episode, but she even has a great personality of being the voice of reason in the show. But she does have her flaws. And honestly, I feel bad for her having her parts mixed up with different kinds of dolls. It really shows that she's more like Frankenstein's monster, in that at first it seems like she's the monster, but then in actuality, the person who did that to her, she is the real monster. In this case, being the little sister. And she's not actually a monster, but I can't help but see those similarities. There are three other characters I would like to mention. First is Destructo, who is also voiced by Jim Cummings. He is a rather interesting case study. See, he's not a bad robot, but he's more doing what he's been programmed to do by the boy, and sometimes it can be blown out of proportion, so you can understand why he's doing these things.
Next is the Closet Monster, who is easily the most evil character in the entire show. And you want to know how evil he is? He's so bad that not even Molly can comfort him. Yeah, he's that evil. But we do see a bit of his more sane side, but that is very rare. Still a great character, though.
And rounding out the main trio is this germ girl from the episode Adventures in Microland. I think that's what it's called, but yeah. Anyways, I have never seen a show that made a germ look so cute in my life, to the point where if I was a germ, I'd want to hang out with her and go on a date. Okay, that's going a little too far into my brain right there, so let's move on to the animation.
And I have to ask, this is a television show? Because this feels like it was made for a feature-length film. But condensed down, obviously, but still, the animation in this show is really good. every character has a very unique design, and the backgrounds, I have to say, as for the mouth movements, well, they can differ, but all of them have good lip sync. See, for characters like Mr. Bumpy, Squishington, and the Germ Girl, along with the Closet Monster, they have more articulated mouths because their mouth areas are more, monster-like, if you will. But then if you look at characters like Molly, she has a more, sticker-like mouth, if you will. Almost like she belongs in Moral Oral. And it doesn't just apply to her. The same thing can also apply to Destructo, if you really do think about it. Of course, the best animation can be found in the intro, where Mr. Bumpy literally turns into a lightning bolt onto the desk. I don't think I have ever seen stop motion do that, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, the animation, it's pretty dang good. Now, how is about the voice acting? Well, I've already mentioned Jim Cummings with his multiple roles, but there are other voice actors too.
For example, you got Rob Paulson voicing Squishington, among other characters, Gail Mathias of Saturday Night Live fame as Molly herself, Jeff Bennett as both Gloog and Sleemouth, and the man providing the voice of Odiferous J. Stinkbug is none other than Gilbert Gottfried himself. So, with everything I've said about this show, from the writing, to the character and moral dynamics, to the animation, to even the voice acting, what is it I'm going to give this show? Well, I took some time to think about this, and since it's not a perfect show, but an amazing one, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 stars. Does that mean it gets the Magellan, the Dragon, and Cooey seal of approval? Yes it does. Everything from a 9 to a 10 out of 10 deserves this award. And that's everything I have to say about this show. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I may check them out. And let me know if there's a show you'd like for me to review. So what is it I'm going to do now for the Season 1 finale? Well, instead of reviewing a TV show, I have decided to take a look at the best roles of one of my favorite voice actors ever, since his 100th birthday is actually next month. So why don't we take the time to celebrate this man's legendary career, shall we?